Due Process, recipient of 6 Mid-Atlantic Emmy Awards.
Don't abandon your baby. There's a safe haven for New Jersey infants. No names or records required.
A PR campaign for a program with a mission to save the lives of abandoned newborn babies. Safe Haven, now 2 years old. Is it legalized child abandonment or a life-saving success? Safe Haven under scrutiny on this edition of Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process is made possible by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law. Additional funding is provided by Lawyer's Diary and Manual.
Pregnancies denied and hidden, babies abandoned and thrown into dumpsters, teenagers jailed for the murder of their newborns. It's no wonder that we all felt the need to do something. I'm Raymond Brown, and that something was the 1999 Infant Protection Act, the Safe Haven Law. It's 2 years old this month, so on this edition of Due Process, we look at Safe Haven. Is it saving lives or just balm for our collective conscience? We'll look at both sides of the Safe Haven story, but first, here's Sandy King with how we got the law and how it's working.
Raymond, one way we can judge the law is by looking at the numbers. In 24 months, 10 babies turned over. Their mothers cloaked in its confidentiality, safe from exposure and prosecution. 10 babies who proponents say might otherwise be dead.
There's a safe haven for New Jersey infants. No names or records required. No shame, no blame, no names.
No names, no penalty, no recrimination. That's at the heart of the Safe Haven Law. Its goal to save newborns who might otherwise be abandoned, even killed, by giving their mothers an easy way out.
We do ask information, as much information as possible, but the parent is free or the family member is free to walk away.
And in the 2 years since Safe Haven became law, 10 mothers have walked away, getting their babies to hospitals, to safety, and ultimately to new families, without having to answer a single question.
If we guarantee the mother anonymity, then actually we were saving 2 lives. We were saving the baby's life, and then the mother would be spared from a life in jail.
It was the specter of those dead babies and jailed mothers that made Safe Haven such an easy sell.
Don't abandon your baby.
In the Assembly, not a single vote in opposition.
The statement, in my judgment, not so much of what troubles are out there, but more so a statement as to what we believe government must do.
Must do, it had seemed, in the wake of 2 shocking front-page cases within just 7 months. Not the only newborns killed or literally thrown away that year, but cases so bizarre, so awful, that even a jaded public was stunned and spurred to action.
Please let us help you. Please give your baby a chance. No secret is worth your future. No secret is worth a life.
First, in November '96, the case of Amy Grossberg and Brian Peterson, 2 college students from Bergen County who delivered their baby in a Delaware motel, then left it in a dumpster to die. And the following June,
asphyxia due to manual strangulation and obstruction of the external airway orifices. Manner of death, homicide.
Melissa Drexler of Lacey Township, dubbed the prom mom after she delivered in the bathroom at her high school prom, killed her baby, and went back to the dance floor.
Whether they're teen parents, whether they're parents that this is an unwanted, they've had multiple pregnancies, we've seen the severe effects of abandonment, which can be death. and it's a sad thing, and it's a tragedy.
The kind of tragedy Safe Haven is supposed to prevent. And at Jersey City Medical, where 2 Safe Haven babies have been dropped off, they say it's working.
They were full-term babies. One had no prenatal care, but they were good weight and in good shape, and the families were just under distress.
The kind of distress that brought the first Safe Haven baby to Newark Beth Israel 2 years ago, less than 2 weeks after the bill became law.
Directive had just come out from the Department of Health that we would be getting these, and I had planned on telling the staff the following morning. Next thing I get a call that the baby's already here.
That baby and most of the other Safe Haven kids are finding their way to adoptive families and what we hope will be a good life.
Here was a healthy baby delivered to us, and it's like, great, happy baby, move on.
Still, there are better ways to get an unwanted baby to a new and loving family. Molly Sheehan's birth mother did it the best way. A responsible agency, counseling and prenatal care, an adoptive family involved even at delivery.
If these young women would make a decision to choose an agency, whether it be an agency that keeps anonymity or an agency that does promote openness, at least they'd be able to receive the counseling that many of the agencies do provide. Some agencies, in fact, our agency actually lets the birth parents choose the adoptive family. Our birth family actually chose the 3 of us to be Molly's family.
And in the Sheehan's kind of open adoption, the birth parents can even choose to continue some involvement.
We would be her mom and dad, but would still be able to interact with her birth mother and her birth father on occasion, and also any siblings.
But Safe Haven's intended for a different kind of mother, one desperate to hide a pregnancy, one who may even be in dangerous denial.
It does give some women an opportunity to safely place a child without doing some of the crazy things that you read about in the newspapers and on the news, abandonment in dumpsters and horrible things like that.
No shame, no blame, no names.
Still, critics insist what Safe Haven's done is to legalize child abandonment. But proponents say that ignores just how much is at stake.
People will debate the pros and cons of the law and say, well, the law really doesn't work. But you know what? If it saved one kid, it's worked. So, you know, that's good enough for me.
The first Safe Haven law was passed in Texas, where no child was turned in for nearly a year. But here in New Jersey, the first Safe Haven baby showed up just 10 days from the time the bill was passed. There have been 9 more since, and 4 others not officially Safe Haven. Their mothers gave birth in hospitals before they walked away. But would they otherwise have been, Raymond, abandoned and left to die?
Cindy, I think the question is whether Safe Haven means we've seen an end to dumpster babies.
Well, we are still seeing babies born in secrecy and discarded every year, but the numbers are down. In the 20 months, say, before Safe Haven was passed, there were 11 such cases. In the 2 years since Safe Haven became law, just 5.
So, should we call Safe Haven a success, or have we encouraged the abandonment of newborns? Those questions and more when we come back, so stay with us.
I absolutely believe in it because I was adopted myself, and I could have gotten left in a trash can or on the street corner. But my childhood was so wonderful through adoption.
I think they should be able to bring them to a hospital or a police station or someplace where they'll be taken care of inside.
There's no reason to leave a child in a trash bin. As a mother myself, because there's so many people who are dying to adopt.
I think it's a sad situation. And I think they should have some things for the mothers so they won't have to give up their babies.
You have to understand that people must be desperate if that's their only option.
I mean, just to keep them alive and not to find them in garbage cans or wherever.
It's a shame, but you know,
if a person's going to drop a baby off someplace and abandon it, I don't know if they're really going to take the, you know, what it takes to take it to the police station. So, in theory, it sounds nice. I don't know if it would ever work.
But good idea or bad, Safe Haven has taken root, and not just in New Jersey. Nearly half the states have passed laws of their own. But are the laws effective? Does the trend make sense? We'll get some very different answers from our panel of experts. Here in Trenton is Mary Daly, Social Service Director of Adoptions from the Heart, an agency with offices in 7 states. She's a critic of Safe Haven. And Carol Corbin Walker, President-elect of the New Jersey State Bar Association, who's been a longtime activist in mentoring young women. And with us from Newark, Sister Ann Stango, Vice President of St. Joseph's Medical Center in Paterson, who lobbied the legislature to get the Safe Haven law passed. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Mary Daly, it makes sense for me to start with you. I should point out that I represented or worked on the defense team for Amy Grossberg. That was kind of my first exposure to this subject in depth, but certainly the Assembly, when it voted on this act, was unanimous in passing it, and it sort of seems like a mom and pop idea that where there are some women or couples at the margins emotionally and there's no other choice, why not create a Safe Haven law? You're a critic. Why?
I think the agency is a critic to one point. I think eliminating any kind of criminal charge against a woman who has a child in that emotional state is absolutely something we are certainly in favor of. However, I think safe havens, and we've seen that across the country, have eliminated a very big element. One, that we already have a legal mechanism in place for women and men who, for whatever reason, are unable to parent that child, and that is adoption. And unfortunately in this country, and in this state in particular, adoption is not promoted as a decent option. Abandonment is okay, but no services to the child or to the birth family.
I can understand an argument that says we need more resources devoted to adoptions or to having people understand adoptions, but do you disagree with the notion that seems to be pretty clear that there are at the margins, emotionally, people of all classes and races at various times where the only choice seems to be either something like Safe Haven or perhaps death for the child or injury for the child and then incarceration for that person. And in those instances, something like Safe Haven makes sense.
I think if the legislator had promoted money to all the agencies to promote counseling in the schools, to counselors, to children, and I am saying children, young teenagers, these are the people who we're traditionally seeing abandoning their children, and let them know that there's free, confidential counseling available to them, that they do have options, that they can get free prenatal care, that there are families waiting to adopt their baby, that there is no shame to it, and in the best interest of their child should have information about their birth family. They don't have to divulge everything, but it would be nice to know the race of the child. It would be nice for a child to know some medical history on this family.
But let me ask you the tough question. Are you saying that if we are more effectively educated folks and if we promoted adoption and educated people about its reality, that you could guarantee that we wouldn't need a safe haven for the 1, the 2, the 3 people a year who are desperate enough that the choice is death or serious injury to the child?
Of course not. And if a child can be saved with this legislation, of course we're all in favor of that. However, it just left off a very important element. I don't think the general public, unless they are dying and hoping to adopt a baby because they can have children of their own, or they have a child or a young adult who's been in the situation of an unplanned pregnancy, no one thinks about adoption at all. We have 2 choices normally. We keep a child, we abort a child, or in the...
Sister, I know you wanted to jump in. Go ahead.
Well, I can understand Mary to a point, but it seems to me with Safe Haven, she gets her wish too, because when these children are turned into the hospitals, we immediately turn them over to DYFS, who I understand has approved parents in waiting. And these children are not caught in the foster care system. They're placed right away with families that have already been approved for adoption. There's also another factor to this I think that Mary misses, and I see it from the hospital. We run clinics for teens who are pregnant, and we certainly talk about adoption through that area. These are for girls that are emotionally unstable right after birth. I got into it because a 15-year-old threw her baby out the window in Paterson. and was found along the railroad tracks, brought to the hospital, and the baby died. I felt something was wrong. I wanted to put out a sign to Pattersonians, don't throw your babies away, don't harm them, bring them to me. I was told we couldn't do it because it was against the law.
Let me bring Carol into the conversation. Carol, it seems to me that part of what we're talking about, and maybe implicit in what Mary's wrestling with, is the question of whether, even if you have adequate resources to educate, and even if you do all the things, many of which the society isn't doing for young women, isn't it at least a possibility that there may always be at the margins people who are so desperate or at the end of a psychological rope that it's either safe haven or something worse?
No, I agree with that proposition, and I also agree with the sister. It's important for us to view this as an alternative, as a step in the right direction. I don't believe that the safe haven law and what Mary is espousing are mutually exclusive. In fact, they are compatible, because one of the issues that Mary talked about was not having the information as to the history of the child. Yes. Incorporated within the safe haven law is that if the person wants to, they can voluntarily give that information. In addition, it encourages the distraught, the teenager who does not know what else to do, and gives them a viable, wonderful option to save a life.
I totally agree, and I didn't realize I was going to be a critic of the bill. I guess my criticism of the bill is that it left out an important piece, that there is another option for these teenagers, and those of you may not know, some schools will not allow adoption agencies to even talk to the guidance counselors or the teachers, so that they can, the teachers who are very close to students, so that they can tell students and college students there's another option out here. Obviously, yes, safe havens is wonderful. No one wants a woman to be...
Mary, let me move you a little bit out of maybe what's an uncomfortable role as you're not an all-out opponent, but you're critical. But let me deal with a practical question.
Right. Sure.
I was in the police station in my town recently paying some parking tickets, I should point out. Okay. But for myself and for many other miscreants like me, right above the window is a big sign about safe haven. That's part of what was an initial $500,000 used to promote the program, and the governor has just signed another bill which is going to promote another $500,000. Now, given the fact that there are limited state resources, are you saying that you'd want to take some of that money or some of the limited resources that we have and use them for promoting education about adoption generally, if in fact we're faced with a situation where there isn't an unlimited amount of money?
Even minimally to educate the people at the end of that hotline. There are over 70 licensed adoption agencies. But if you had the $500,000 tomorrow, would you spend it on Safe Haven if it was your choice? Would you spend half of it on Safe Haven? Would you spend none of it on promoting Safe Haven, which is now a law? I think I'd spend some of it on Safe Haven, and I'd like a little piece left for educating out into the general public, and also educating the counselors at the end of the
Sister,
hotline.
I know you want to get in. How important is the educational component?
It's very important, and that's what I want to say. It's not just for Safe Haven to do it or the state. We have a child safety and a protection center in our children's hospital. Our doctors and nurses are out in the community constantly, and we are in the schools. We had assemblies for all the years, 4 years of high school, in both of the big high schools in Patterson. And in the 2 years that this law has been in effect, we have not had one child turned into a safe haven, but we also haven't had any kind of dumpster babies either. And we're noticing a more educated group coming into the hospital and spreading the news. So we are educating. And
well, do you think it's essential that we use $500,000, which is an important resource, in the context of public service announcements like the ones we saw at the beginning of this program?
Definitely.
Or is that a resource that might be used in other ways, as Mary Daly suggested?
I like to use it on TV. I like to use it in the different languages. Patterson has a big Spanish population. I want to see a lot of that in Spanish. I want to see it in Arabic. I want to see it in Bangladesh. I think they have a lot of educating to do in all the different languages, because it's not just white Americans that are in a position where they're harming their children. I also think they could use it to talk about the battered children and about shaken baby syndrome. It's all connected.
Let me turn back to Carol for a moment. We're talking about money for public service announcements. If you had another $500,000 to be used in terms of young women throughout the state, how would you use it in terms of a single aspect of either counseling or education? That is, what would you focus on as the place we need to go in terms of minimizing the number of women who get to that point of desperation?
Grade school. I would start implementing a program at the grade school level. It is somewhat alarming.
What kind of program?
Well, you're asking me what type of program? I would say, for starters, incorporate in the health classes or something like that the viability of the program. I would also incorporate the education, making sure that not just women, but the young men also understand what it is to engage in acts that bring about a child like that, the responsibility, the importance of abstinence, the importance of getting married, the importance of all these other social aspects that we sometimes forget. But I think sometimes when we look at counseling programs, we look at the high school level, and I think that's too late. You have to catch the children at the point where they're most impressionable, and I'm talking about the 3rd and 4th, 5th graders, because the things that they're exposed to in today's society on the television is just incredible.
Sister Ann, let me ask you a question that is a little bit critical of the program. In New Jersey, the mother has essentially 21 days after she has drop the baby at a safe haven facility, a hospital, for example, after which the process begins of terminating her parental rights. It seems to me that the long-range objective of most programs ought to be to see if family unification down the road is a possibility. Doesn't that seem kind of early to begin the process of dealing with a person who may be under tremendous emotional stress at the time they make the decision to give up this child?
When this law was first being thought about, we had discussed a lot of it. This law is basically to save the child. It's not to save the family. It's not to improve family life. It's to save the baby who's in danger of being killed by an emotional mother. And if you lose that focus, then this law gets so enlarged that it becomes unimportant. The focus is to save the baby.
But once the child is in the hands of DYFS, the question is, why not allow more time so that that mother might, like any other mother who's made a decision, have a chance to rethink it, come back, and be evaluated in terms of continuing or establishing parental rights?
They have a choice. I agree. It's a short period of time. But when you look at some things, sometimes it takes the mothers months, years to get adjusted to their lifestyle, and the baby gets caught in a foster care system. I don't think these babies should be caught in a foster care system. They're brand new babies. They have parents waiting for brand new babies. Why make them wait? I don't see that.
Does it surprise any of you that there have only been between 10 and 14, depending on how you define it, children that have been placed in safe haven? Would you have expected more, any of you?
I wouldn't have.
No?
And I do agree that if one of those children would have died without safe havens, then safe havens has been worth everything.
Does the number surprise you, Carol?
Actually, it does surprise me. I would think that at this point in time, the number would be greater, because before this bill was enacted, there were so many awful incidences that we all are aware of, with the child being placed in a dumpster, the railroad tracks being left out in a car where the child froze to death. So I would have thought there would have been more, just by virtue of having this bill and having safe haven. However, on the other hand, based on the 10 to 14, maybe the educational programs that they now have in place in the grade school, in the high school, what have you, might be working. Right. I don't know what the reason is.
Let me ask, Sister, if there is a significant increase, or if there were even more money available for promotion, do you think that would increase the numbers, or are we reaching everybody who you think needs to be reached?
Oh, I don't think we're reaching everybody that needs to be reached. But I also think, I'm not surprised that the numbers are few, because there's a tendency of women to still want to keep their children. They had the choice of getting rid of the child. If they didn't want it, they could have aborted it, and they didn't do it. So that the ones that do have the babies, they struggle with whether
Sister,
they should keep it or not.
I'm down to 45 seconds. Can you give me one quick phrase that would express where we have to go next in terms of working with folks on the margin?
I think we need more television ads in more different markets.
All right. Let me ask Mary Daly the same question. people on the margin, what else can we do, people who are desperate?
I think there needs to be more education for those answering hotlines, for those in police stations, for those in hospitals, to provide the counseling and reassurance to women who are desperate and walk in the door.
I agree with both Sister and Mary. More education, have it in various languages, because as long as you can communicate with the outside world with respect to this wonderful program, I believe that more people might avail themselves of it.
Fascinating discussion. Thank you all for being with us. That's it for this edition of Due Process. With our thanks to Sister Ann Stango, to Mary Daly, to Carol Corbin Walker, and to you for watching. But we hope you'll join us next week for yet another cutting-edge issue of law and social justice. Till then, for Sandy King and all of us here, I'm Raymond Brown. Thanks for watching.
Some agencies, in fact, our agency actually lets the birth parents choose the adoptive family. Our birth family actually chose the three of us to be Molly's family. So I think the lack of counseling is probably the biggest detriment to the law. However, on the other side, it does give some women an opportunity to safely place a child without doing some of the crazy things that you read about in the newspapers and on the news, abandonment in dumpsters and horrible things like that.
Major funding for Due Process was made possible by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law. Additional funding was provided by Lawyer's Diary and Manual,